Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. We are now into top 3 on the book authored by Jnananda Bharati Swamigal, The Great Equation. In top 2, the takeaways are 3 questions. How long should one perform karmas or actions? Which the answer is as long as we are attached to this body. How long should one offer bakti? One should offer bakti till such time one is dependent on this body and in this universe. As long as there is a dependency factor in us, till we get over it, we'll have to depend on bhakti. How long should one pursue the jnana marga? The answer is till such time one really gains experience. Now, what is the prescription given to us to pursue this path of salvation or the path of Vedanta? Our karmas can either yield punya if they are dharmic acts, or papa if it is adharmic acts, as per the text of the scriptures. Now, therefore, they are recommending a 3-step process. Step 1, we should avoid adharmic acts and in the process liquidate our papa. Then comes the dharmic acts or the punya, which we can do it in 2 ways. We can do it as sakama and acquire punya and earn the fruits and benefits of it and enjoy it in this material world using our body, mind and buddhi. That's one way. Earn the punya and exhaust the punya. The other way is earn the punya but do not exhaust it on yourself. Use it to purify oneself. So, the 4 steps that Vedanta conceives to us is: stop performing adharmic acts slowly. As long as we are engaged in dharma, then we are distancing ourselves from the path or the roads to Vedanta. 2, we should ensure that we take the efforts in nullifying these adharmic acts. First is the desire to stop performing adharma. And 2, the effort to nullify it. 3, how do we nullify it? By regulating and performing actions of punya and enjoy the fruits of it. That's the stage we need to pass through. And when we become tired, when we become saturated, which will happen in the path of Vedanta, then punya karmas should be used as a purificatory rite to cleanse our mind, body and buddhi. Start performing it in a selfless way and earn what we call it nishkama karma. Punya is also a prison. And Swamigal gives an example. If you want to perform Punya karma, reap the benefits and enjoy the fruits, then you are a prisoner, which is a prison which is stone-walled. Whereas if you perform the Punya and it starts to purify oneself slowly, then the prison slowly becomes transparent. It becomes a glass-housed prison. All right, what is the advantage of a glass-housed prison? It will permit a person to look both at the outside world and also realize that he or she is inside a prison. And one therefore needs to get out of this. Getting out of the prison and in the process getting out of the sight of this universal world. Purification leads one there, which we call it as Chitta Shuddhi. Chitta Shuddhi is possible only when we perform both our karmas, our actions, and our bhakti in a selfless manner. Karma in a selfless action, and bhakti with a mind to surrender without asking anything in return. Nothing in return. So these are twin steps which one is recommended to follow. Now we are talking about these 4 steps. What do they really signify? It only signifies adharma which is bound to bring us peril, which is not going to last. The desire emanating or the fulfillment of action emanating of the adharma, which is not going to last, will slowly be substituted by dharmic acts which are also not lasting. But it gives us the mind and the ability to stabilize. So, from a more translucent, more impermanent actions, we move to more permanent but still impermanent state. And over a period of time, it will make us lead to show that from lasting options, there is a way to connect to an everlasting option. And Swamigal gives this example. The flow of light into a dark space will throw light and in the process evacuate the darkness. So, as light keeps moving into a darkness, darkness starts diminishing slowly. And darkness is substituted by light. So, performance of dharmic acts and performance without attachment or results or expectations is like a light moving into a dark space and substituting or evacuating, slowly diminishing the darkness and throwing more and more light. What is the net takeaway by doing this? What do I get by moving into a state of doing Nishkamya karma, selfless act and surrendered bhakti? What do I get? This will lead us to the path, says Vedanta, where one can start to assimilate the distinction which the brightness of the gold, which brings the natural inherent brightness in it, and make us realize The brightness is associated only to the gold and not to the name and form called ring or a necklace. It will make us slowly feel in the universe that when things happen, when great things happen, we will be able to see slowly this greatness is arising out of the bliss attached to it, rather than the name or the form. This is one benefit which we will start acquiring slowly when we get into the path. And Vedanta says, look here, how long should you be doing this? And it says, when your hands are soaked in oil, don't we attempt to remove them by putting soap over it, cleansing the hands, washing the hands using soap. And once soap removes the oily substance out of our hands, and once we wash our hands under water, then do we continue to use soap in our hands? We don't do it. We apply it only to remove the grease or the oily substance. Whether it is karma marga or bhakti marga or jnana marga, all these are cleanses once we attain the ultimate goal of bliss. So, this is the connect they first give, how long we should do and why we should do. And by start migrating from our present state slowly into the path of Vedanta, how from a stone-walled prison we will start seeing a glass-visioned prison, looking both at the outside world and the internal sufferings which we undergo, and therefore a need for a change. Now, let's connect this first. This is something to do with the universe. Let's connect this with now to our individual soul. So, Vedanta puts the following questions. We keep often saying, I walk, I eat, I run, I think, I desire, I don't like it. So, it is the legs that walk, but we say, I walk. It's the mouth which consumes the food, but we say, I eat. Now, if we start applying our mind into these fractions, can we identify leg as the I? Can we identify our hands as the I? Because each one is a fragment or a part into the whole body. If you identify the leg, what happens to your mind? If you identify your mind, what happens to your buddhi? Therefore, it says, when you get identified, identify with your legs, identify with your hands. Vedanta slowly makes you realize that the I that we associate with walking is something connected to the leg, and it is not the I as we understand or represent. Let's translate it and expand it a little further, because only then this example will serve the desired purpose. Like legs and hands and thoughts and desires, we also play several roles in life. A role of a father, a role of a son, a role of a teacher, a role of a doctor, a role as a social worker, a role of somebody who is exercising authority or power. Vedanta therefore says, look here, these are roles which you perform, undoubtedly. But every time you perform a role, it identifies you and takes you to a set of prescriptions or duties by the scriptures. As a father, you are supposed to do your duties. As a son, you are supposed to do the following duties to your father, to your parents. As a teacher, you have a set of obligations towards the students. As a student, you have a set of duties towards your teacher. So, when we assume, because this is very important, because after a few minutes, Vedanta will connect you to say how these positions are completely transient and temporary. We started with identifying I walk and I sleep. Now we are moving to the next phase. So, every role, every status to us has identified duties and obligations, which our scriptures prescribe it as dharma to be performed in that role. So, if you perform your dharma as a teacher, as a student, as a father, as a son, then those dharmic acts, duties performed as actions, will slowly identify you to say these positions are effective. Because you do it with a selfless commitment and therefore it cleanses. So, it reduces from punya, from papa, from dharma, adharma, from the roles, it slowly boils down to whatever we are doing today. We have a role in this human body. That role, if you identify the status of that role, it gives you a set of duties and responsibilities. Every role has a set of duties and responsibilities, without exception. Now, can you perform those rules, those responsibilities and duties in that manner? And these dharmic acts are put into two buckets. Samanya dharma, don't lie, don't steal, don't harm, don't injure. And people who have an aspiration to progress, then it prescribes Vishesha dharma. So the duties are of two types. To the roles you perform. And if you constantly perform the Samanya dharma and the Vishesha dharma, then it says, look at this. Vedanta says this in unmistaking terms. Every dharmic act or action is only to the body and to the mind and to the buddhi, and not to the soul. Once a connect happens to this individual soul, and it starts to look and understand and comprehend that this individual soul is not different from bliss, not different from universal soul, then where is the place for dharma thereafter? It's an important aspect in Vedanta. This is the defining moment of when dharma, practice of dharma needs to find a stoppage. It would find a place to stop, a destination to stop, when this individual soul is able to connect with the bliss or the ultimate soul, which we call it as Brahman or God. Once this integration happens, where is the space for the body? And therefore, where is the requirement for the body to practice dharma thereafter? Only till realization Dharma works. Like we climb up the ladder. Once we reach the top of the terrace, we don't need the ladder anymore. So, dharmas and karmas are meant to work itself, saturate itself, exhaust itself, and finally evacuate itself automatically, disassociate itself when the connect happens between the individual soul and the Brahman. Therefore, the process now continues further when we come to the individual body and mind. Vedanta, doing dharmas is something which is Bhagirangam, which is explicit. But while doing these dharmas, how should our focus be? For which Vedanta teaches certain rudimentary fundamental concepts. It says, look at you, the faculties of actions, like the hands, like the legs, excretion. So the 5 faculties of actions, what we call the karmendriyas, and the 5 faculties of sensation, touch, hear, taste, smell. So it is the faculties of sensation called Jnanendriyas which actually connect us to this universe or this material world. The connect happens through the faculties of sensation. And once it connects with this universe, the information that is received out from the universe into this body starts getting processed by a power center called mind and buddhi. So Vedanta splits this powerhouse of energy, the powerhouse of energy for Jnanendriyas or the faculties of sensation, is split into 2 parts, the impure part and the pure part. Why do we call it impure part and the pure part? See, the impure part identifies easily the name and the form, and the pure part informs whether this is desirable or not. Now for sure we know what is the impure part. See, the impure part, the pure part identifies the perception in a correct manner. See, the perception by the buddhi will tell us what is correct. But by the perception by the mind will start coloring it with its desires. And therefore, mind is considered to be impure and buddhi is considered to be a pure form of energy when it comes to faculties of sensation. Now, what is the powerhouse of energy for faculties of action? Walking, using our hands and working, effort. Vedanta says the powerhouse of faculties of action is prana, the 5 types of pranas. Now, a combination of these karmendriyas, the jnanendriyas, the pranas, the mind and the buddhi, 17 of them. Now, what do they form? We should understand that, says Vedanta. It says, The outer layer of this human body, what we call the physical body, is nothing but made out of food. And therefore, it is called as Annamaya Kosha. The karmendriyas or faculties of action with the panchapranas form what we call it as the next layer or sheath, the pranamaya kosha. The faculties of sensation with the impure powerhouse of energy, which is called the manas or the mind, forms the third sheath called as manonmaya kosha. The faculties of sensation with the powerhouse of energy, which is in pure state or form, called buddhi, when they combine together, they form the fourth sheath called the vijnanamaya kosha, and upon it lies the innermost sheath. When mind and buddhi melts, this layer of Anandamaya Kosha falls. And it is the Anandamaya Kosha which is the closest sheath, which actually misequates by identifying the individual soul, Jiva, as something distinct from the Supreme Soul or the Paramatma. Therefore, faculties of actions and faculties of sensation on a combination of with prana, buddhi and manas form these five sheets. Our whole body structure, body, mind and intellect is made up of these five sheets. And they in turn can be segregated into the Sthula Sarira, the physical body, the Sukshma Sarira as the mind and the Buddhi. Of course, Sthula Sarira is body and the prana. The Sukshma Sarira as the mind and the Buddhi. And the Karana Sarira or the causal body as the Jiva. Now, Vedanta teaches us how to see that the Jivatma, which is nothing, the individual soul is nothing but the Supreme Soul, misidentifies itself as an individual soul, can see the Sthula Sarira, the physical body, the Sukshma Sarira of mind and Buddhi, and the causal body of the Karana Sarira, namely the Anandamaya Kosha, the Jiva, distinct from the soul. Vedanta teaches us that process. It says, let's take 3 steps, one step at a time. How do we take those steps? Step 1. When it comes to the physical body, you have a food to eat. You sit for a dinner to eat. And dining is our habit. So, when you take the first morsel of food, it is, we eat this first morsel of food. When we eat the second morsel of food, it is, we eat plus the first morsel of food plus the second morsel of food. Third, fourth, fifth, it continues. So Vedanta says, now this happens for one course. This dinner happens also the previous day, the previous week, the previous month. Keeps on dining. This body keeps on dining. Till such time, we put the first question, when did we first? So, this Annamaya Kosha or this physical body, please conceive it as nothing but a sum total of the food we consume. So Vedanta says, imagine your body to be just a storehouse of food. If you start imagining, two things will happen. It will help us to slowly realize taking the right food and avoid unpleasant food. So this leads to Chitta Suddhi. And two, when we start thinking this slowly, it will develop an important attitude in us every time we gulp a morsel of food. We should imagine we actually become only that in the physical form, which will strengthen our willpower slowly to have a proper diet and avoid harmful, injurious food intake into the body. So, keeping the body pure. This is the process which Vedanta teaches. Now, how do we keep the mind and the buddhi clean, pure? Swamigal cites an example. You are in a remote village and it's our first visit to a city. The moment we see the city, we are enamored, we are amazed, we are thrilled, we are shocked, we are surprised. Oh my God, what is this? When we visit the second time, there is a slight reduction in that gratification or satisfaction. When we start visiting the nth time, we get so used and in fact become fatigued or tired. And Vedanta teaches a very, very important philosophy out of this. It says, your subtle body or your mind and buddhi is always one which is a repository or a composition or a constitution arising out of your actions and your experiences. Start realizing this. What is our mind? What is our buddhi? It's a composition of our actions and our experiences. Where will this lead us to if we start disassociating ourselves? So, every time when we take food, it's only for the body. Because Supreme Soul doesn't need food. When we undergo the experience, when actions happen and these perceptions start getting deposited and our mind and buddhi starts forming its shape, its character, its color, its strength, its vigor, its energy, realize that it is only for the mind and the buddhi and not for the soul. And Swamigal says, when it comes to the causal body, it's very, very important. Unlike body, mind and buddhi, which are, body is physically visible, mind and buddhi can be identified. The causal body of Anantamaya Kosha is not tangible. So, there is no specific effort which can be prescribed to seek the indifference. And Vedanta therefore says, if you start regulating the physical body and the subtle body and start modulating it properly, start disassociating it properly, every impact which the body and the mind and the buddhi starts, reformation happens. When the reformation happens, this will have a direct impact on the causal body. There is no need for a separate effort. And in this section, Swamigal concludes by only referring to two important aspects. He says, anyone who identifies physical body to be the soul, they will fall under the classification called Charvakas. Because those are the people who believed physical body is reality. For those who believe, all right, physical body dies, it decays, it gets destroyed, but not the subtle body. You start taking lives after lives because subtle body remains forever. And based on the locations and destinations, it takes shapes and forms. Such a school of thought is called the Tarkikas or the Mimamsakas. Third stage, there are people who are ready to disassociate physical body. They agree it dies. They also agree subtle body dissolves. But they are not ready to agree that the causal body also dissolves. They cling to the causal body because they somehow want to preserve the individual soul as distinct from the supreme soul. And that school of thought is called the Sankhya philosophy, the third stage. And the last one is the Advaitic school of thought, which says all these three states are impermanent, transient, and temporary. Because the Supreme Soul is not the physical body. The Supreme Soul is not the subtle body, nor is the Supreme Soul the causal body. And therefore, Vedanta teaches us the technique that all practices, all forms, names and forms of this universe, and the practice of dharma by the individual will lead to dissemination or dissolution of names and forms, and the disassociation to the physical body and the subtle body and the causal body, thus making one realize it is the Supreme Soul which envelops the whole universe like a sheet of paper on which the printed content is there. And it is the same Supreme Soul which also occupies and lives in this body, but disables us because of the two avarana and vikshepa examples which we saw in the previous talk. Mistaking, concealing a rope first and projecting a snake over it. And therefore a process of training is to be undergone to get back to realize that this is nothing but a manifestation, an illusory manifestation of a snake over a real rope. So Vedanta teaches us this technique. And in this section, Swamigal finally concludes saying that when we do the practice of disassociating ourselves from the physical body, from the subtle body and the causal body, the problem with us is diversing the ownership. It is so natural in human beings. For example, if we have an old coat, or even a torn coat or a cloth or a material, what do? All right, this is used, let's throw it away. It has found its use finally. We don't do that. We find whether somebody more disabled, somebody who is in need of a coat, who can't afford it, can they use this coat? So we find, before we divest our ownership, we try to find whether this can usefully be in the hands of some other as a owner. Same thing happens when we see a coin on the road. This coin does not belong to us. But the moment we see the coin, we realize that it has value. And therefore, this should find a owner. And we start searching for the owner. Who deserves this to have it? So, there is nothing that can be ownerless is not a natural thought for a human mind. And therefore, it takes a lot of time. And therefore, the process becomes harder and harder. So, this section teaches us how this body is made up of. It teaches us how this universe of names and forms work, and how through the process of dharma, using our karmendriyas and jnanendriyas, how we can disassociate and identify this universe as nothing but names and forms, and start detaching ourselves from our physical frame to say, this is a physical body, this is the mind action, this is the action of the buddhi, and we are, the individual soul is nothing but not distinct from the Supreme Soul. With this, we conclude talk 3. Let's see talk 4, next course. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om.